Hello everyone, and welcome back to Dragalia Foundry. Today's video is going to be my review of the new Fire Emblem Lost Heroes Summon Showcase. Apologies for bringing this out a few days later than normal, but I figure by now most of you already know whether or not you plan to summon here. Despite that, I'll still be doing my usual giveaway, so make sure to check out the Gleam link in the description below. This is one of the easiest verdicts I've ever had to render. If you're a fan of these Fire Emblem units, then pull. Otherwise, I'd suggest you wait. Save your Wyrmite for a future gala or a showcase with a desired 4-star. Despite the removal of Wyrmprints from the summoning pool, it's still fairly hard to snipe specific 5-star characters. The more of the featured ones you'd be happy with, the better. You can check out the Summon Simulator, created by Proof and Archaic, no affiliation to me, for exact details on the math in the description below. So instead of focusing on the question of whether to summon, I thought it'd be best to emphasize build ideas and unit comparisons. All of these new units, Marth, Fjorm, and Veronica, are great, but with the possible exception of Veronica, they are luxuries and not necessities. I'll compare them to some budget options which are more widely available and stronger than ever as of this version update, thanks to Wyrmprint changes, co-ability changes on 3 and 4 stars, and stat buffs for all welfare units and all 3 stars. So let's begin with Marth. Of course, Marth is an attack type flame element swordsman. The attack typing just means his stats favor strength rather than HP, although the flame sword type pairing matters more. There are 5 other flame swordsmen in the game, and that pool is tied with light staff wielders as being the most saturated. Fortunately for Marth, he does stand out, both from a stats perspective and a kit one. But that being said, I just don't think he's so much better that he's really necessary to pull for. Marth does have identical stats to the other 5-star flame swordsman, Naveed, although his stun res puts him in a much better position for endgame content. Marth's primary skill, Flickering Flames, deals 7 total hits of damage and grants him a small HP regen buff for 15 seconds. If you add a 4-strike to the end of a 5-hit sword combo, this skill takes less than 2 such combos to fully charge, with its fairly low SP cost of 2875. The HP healed over the entire 15 seconds is around 150 to 200 total for a fully built Marth, depending on his dragon, weapon unbinds, and facility levels. Considering how rapidly this skill is charged, it can add up over the course of a quest. The damage output isn't bad either, and the high number of hits synergizes with one of Marth's abilities. Marth's second skill, Fire Emblem, utilizes Skill Shift. It always deals flame damage in a line. On first use, it buffs Marth's own strength by 10% for 10 seconds. On second use, if the attack connected before, it buffs the entire team's strength by 10% for 10 seconds instead. And on third use, if the previous stage is connected, Fire Emblem buffs the team's strength by 10% and their attack rate by 30% for 10 seconds. These buffs, especially that final one, are quite powerful, even if the buff duration is rather short. Fire Emblem is slower to charge than most moves with Skill Shift, requiring around 4 combos of the aforementioned type. But considering this skill always does damage and always provides some type of buff, it's also hard to be too critical of it. If you can line up the final buff with breaking the enemy boss and a dragon transformation, that's just icing on the cake. Attack rate does affect dragons, by the way. Now we come to Marth's abilities, which are also quite good. Let's start with the familiar stuff. Stun res of 100% is excellent. It means Marth is well suited to fight High Midgard Stormer, who is currently the hardest to win boss in the game. I'll add that this is especially good since, after the update, Sleep Res, the common alternative for flame characters, can now be easily boosted to the amounts needed to fight Void Zephyr using Wyrmprints like Samurai Siesta and Better Together. Flurry Devastation is another existing ability, in Marth's case going up to 13%. A combo count of 15 isn't too hard to maintain, especially when considering Marth's first skill deals 7 hits by itself. Sword units can also utilize their jumping animations, to maintain an uptime against trickier bosses like High Midgard Stormer. The weapon skill on the 5-star Elemental Flame Sword and Marth's own Fire Emblem skill can be used to dodge the 3-way and 8-way tornadoes HMS sends out, allowing Marth to combo unimpeded. The reward of 13% extra critical rate is very good, and means Marth could utilize a crit-centric build. Finally, let's come back to Last Boost. The ability to completely fill the entire team's skill gauges, even once per quest, is very strong. More so if you can control and plan around when this ability activates. The natural thought with an ability like this is to have it activate immediately after a High Dragon's opening blast. As long as you don't make your Marth build too defensive, this should be consistently possible. At that point, your team can reap the rewards. Immediate heals, buffs, damaging skills, all during the phase of High Midgard Stormer where he is least dangerous, allowing your team to unleash. I can see this ability leading to faster clears, and in turn, reducing the chance of late mistakes ending a run. Outside of the High Dragons though, this is basically just a get out of jail free card in a pinch. It would mean 2 to 3 iframes per character, plus some healing over time for Marth himself at a minimum. It's very solid, but unless you're in a High Dragon trial, you shouldn't be taking that many hits to begin with. So let's talk about building Marth. I'll start with the easy decisions, then move toward the harder ones. For dragons, Marth basically wants as much strength as possible. That means an Agni, Cerberus, or a Freet with multiple unbinds. Prometheus and High Brunhilde aren't bad choices either, just be aware you'll have to build around them if you realistically want Marth to fall below 30% HP in a High Dragon trial. For weapons, Levitain is the best choice. It's another attacking skill for Marth and grants him the highest stats possible of any weapon he can use. Inferno Apogee is a fine, easy to craft alternative against HMS specifically, but the skill prep isn't especially good considering Marth's last boost will activate early in that fight. Any teammates can work for Marth, but my favorites include Cerise and Valentine's Hildegard. Both Hildegard and Marth can grant Cerise buffs to boost her first skill's damage, and Cerise can speed up the skill charge rate of her teammates. Hilde's second skill charges fairly slowly, but having Marth will grant her a second use right after the opening blast in HMS, as long as you fire off her skills immediately, since she has 100% skill prep built in. Hildegard's co-ability also helps Marth's regen. Having Marth also means Cerise will have the defense buff from her second skill ready to use by the time Tattered Sky and Storm Chaser hit, since she normally only has time to cast her strength buff before that part of the fight. A third great ally would be Makoto, since he'd enjoy Marth's attack rate buff for his own skill shift loop. Now for the trickiest part of Marth's build, the Wyrmprint choice. For general content, you have a lot of flexibility. I think the Shining Overlord and Levin's Champion probably make up the best all-around pair for Marth, but anything works well enough. Any combination of skill and critical damage will do just fine. For High Midgard Stormer specifically though, Marth doesn't easily survive the opening blast without some type of elemental resistance, HP, or defense to help him do so. So for HMS, I'd recommend using Flash of Genius if possible, alongside the Shining Overlord and Levitain. If you're using a budget dragon like Ifrit or a budget weapon like the Inferno Apogee, however, you'll probably need to use a Glorious Tempest or Give Me Your Wounded, since that'd technically help with Marth's self-healing. All in all, Marth can be very effective and beginner-friendly for a fight like High Midgard Stormer, and is great for general wind content. But the last thing I want to do is compare him to Yuden, since that's a flame sword everyone has access to for free. Yuden has one ability which won't help much in combat, Player EXP. He has another, Dragon's Claws, that only activates once or twice per match. These factors and his lower stats do make Yuden worse than Marth. Yet he also has stun res of 100%, and he also has 2 attacking skills. The truth is, HMS isn't so hard or demanding that you really need much more than that to clear. here's a budget build for Yuden that would work quite well for HMS beginners. The chance of initial survival is 95%, with multiple options to reach 100%, either a single unbind on Glorious Tempest, or bringing Yuden to 50 nodes, or leveling up his sword dojos to level 18 and 20 instead of level 16 each. That's all before using a stronger weapon, Levitain, or a more powerful dragon like Agni or Cerberus. Basically, Yuden is good enough, even if I still really love Marth as a character and as a brand new unit. That theme continues with our second new unit for today, Fjorm. Fjorm is an attack type water lancer, which is also a fairly deep pool, with there being 4 other options. None of the other water lancers are attack types, so Fjorm's strength does make her stand out. At her maximum, she has identical HP to Elisanne with 48 more strength, and an equivalent, and rather useful, HP co-ability up to 15%. But we will come back to that comparison in just a moment. First, let's talk about Fjorm's skills and abilities. Fjorm's primary skill, Frigid Smash, deals damage and has a high chance of freezing her enemies. Thanks to her skill prep of 100%, this makes Fjorm pretty good in general content and for speedruns involving affliction locking, much like Lily. Of course, not all foes can be frozen, including Hilda. This is where Fjorm's second skill and remaining abilities are quite relevant, however. Fjorm's innate burn res of 100% makes her extremely viable for that fight, and her skill prep in combination with Ice Mirror works well against Hilda's opening blast. Ice Mirror scales in damage depending on how much damage Fjorm takes while it's active. Its super armor allows her to even tank purple area of effect moves. She still takes damage, but the ability to remain standing and counter through purples is unprecedented. Finally, to wrap around to Fjorm's first ability, Last Bravery. Just like Marth's, it's good if limited in use. As with Marth, the most straightforward time to activate this is the opening of a High Dragon Trial. Versus Hilda, it's a nice bonus, and the damage boost is sizable enough that this could push a seasoned team over the top to an eventual pre-Grand X Muspelheim clear, which always makes the fight less chaotic. Outside the High Dragon context, it's basically like Marth's, a one-use save for Fjorm and the team. It's not something I'd expect to see often, but it could help for, say, more consistent auto-battle clears. As far as builds go, Fjorm wants a Strength Dragon. Dragonule Jean and Leviathan are the best possible choices, with Vojinoy being a viable 4-star option. Poseidon, High Mercury, Poliahu, and Simurgh will make Fjorm's Last Bravery harder to trigger, and they give her lower strength to boot, so these options should be avoided if possible. For weapons, Fjorm could opt for one of 2 choices. Strommare has full HP equals defense, and Hilda's Bane, which makes it useful for that fight, where it also frees up Wormprint slots for Fjorm. Ocean Lord has higher stats and is better for general use, but versus HBH, the lack of a defense ability does mean you'd need to spend a Wormprint slot on Volcanic Queen for many of the builds you'd tend to use. In terms of teammates, I like Rex and Lily most. Rex's defense co-ability allows Fjorm to safely overlap with an ally during Flame Chaser, meaning she can use Ice Mirror for lots of damage in retaliation. Lily, meanwhile, has skill damage as a co-ability, ideal for someone with multiple attacking skills like Fjorm. Now for Wormprints, there are a couple of routes to go. For general content, I like Dragon and Tamer thanks to its 40% skill damage plus Shadow Res, which is actually pretty nice for, say, the ongoing defensive battles. As a secondary print, I'm a fan of the Prince of Dragonule or Levin's Champion. For Hilda specifically though, if you're using Strommare, then Fjorm can forego Volcanic Queen in favor of Crystallian Envoy, and use that alongside Dragon and Tamer, ideally with Dragonule Jean d'Arc. If you're using Vojinoy though, you will need a slightly stronger co-ability or facilities to pull this off. With Ocean Lord, Volcanic Queen is generally safer than Crystallian Envoy unless your 5-star Gacha Strength Dragon, facilities, weapon, and co-ability are truly maxed. The Shadow Res on Dragon and Tamer does feel a bit wasted here, so I could also see opting for something like Resounding Rendition instead. And, well, that's about it for Fjorm. She is very powerful, and the burst damage from Ice Mirror can be massive if used to block especially powerful attacks. The ability to avoid knockdown from any attack is impressive, but do be careful. Fjorm can still die during Ice Mirror, and the jumping attack portion of the skill can be interrupted by purple AoEs and the like. The thing about Fjorm, though, is that Elisanne is probably the best of the original welfare units we get by playing the campaign of Dragalia Lost. She's one of the best, if not the best, buff bots in the game, meaning Fjorm 2 is more of a luxury unit. Here's a sample build for Elisanne that'd be perfectly viable against Hilda. Thanks to the Wyrmprint update, she can easily hit 100% burn res with a max unbound Fireside Gathering, which was her one major weakness in the past. That Wyrmprint and Crystallian Envoy, alongside the Void Lance, give Elisanne plenty of wiggle room to survive versus HBH, even with a budget dragon like Vojanoi, minimal facility levels, and no investment into her co-ability nodes. Her real strength from there is casting her S1 Brave Bastion as much as possible, thereby powering up your entire team. It's incredibly effective and historically has been a staple in speed clears for that particular fight. Just as with Yuden, this build could be powered up even further if you have access to a stronger dragon, more weapon unbinds, or co-ability node upgrades. Hopefully this puts your mind at ease if you didn't get Fjorm. As good as she may be, Elisanne is just as good, if not a little bit better, with strong teammates to buff. So that brings us to Veronica. Veronica is certainly the biggest wildcard of these new units, in part because right now there's not an especially hard light void battle, nor is High Jupiter's trial released. In that sense, what makes a shadow unit good is somewhat up in the air. High Mercury's trial broke the mold of the previous High Dragons, which throws predictions for High Jupiter out the window. So this is definitely my most speculative analysis. Nevertheless, let's take a look at Veronica. Veronica is an attack type Shadow Wand with a very high strength stat, ranked 5th in the game. There are only two other Shadow Wands, Clymen and Althemia, the latter of whom I'll discuss more soon. Veronica outpowers both in terms of raw strength, and her kit is also excellent. The primary source of Veronica's power is her first skill, Gespenst. By maintaining low HP, Veronica can deal increased damage through this move, up to a very high amount. However, this conflicts somewhat with Veronica's second skill, Nosferatu, which heals Veronica up to 5% of the amount of damage dealt. The good news is two attacking skills makes Veronica fairly easy to build, but the bad is that she may be tricky to play, with staying at just the right amount of HP posing a challenge. The last series of abilities continues on Veronica, and her unique ability is known as Last Destruction. This presents yet another HP condition to consider, but at least it's only once per quest. In this case, Veronica and her entire team get a 40% boost to the damage dealt by their next attacking skill. It's okay, but I do feel it's probably the weakest of the three. One upside is that you can technically save this until the time is right in a fight, including for a dragon skill, if you can avoid using attacking skills up until that point. For now though, since all current high dragons hit Veronica for neutral damage, this ability will virtually always trigger at the start of a fight when using her in those battles as an off-meta choice. Veronica's second and third abilities are more straightforward. Paralysis Res is probably a good thing in general when it comes to future content like High Jupiter. We've seen how punishing Burn is in High Brunhilde, so Veronica not needing a Wyrmprint slot to add resistance to paralysis will likely be helpful. Her final ability, Skill Prep of 100%, is also good. It means she can cast her skills at the start of a match, so against high dragons, she can fire off Gespenst after the opening blast, then use Nosferatu and possibly her weapon skill to begin patching herself up. It's a pretty solid opener for the time being. Veronica, being Shadow Element, has no inherent weaknesses, which is an edge she holds over the other two units on this banner. It means, as I alluded to, she isn't too bad of a choice if you wish to have her clear all high dragon trials by herself. Although her frailty may pose an issue versus High Brunhilde, where she'd need a maxed out lance, axe, and chocolatier Staniel around just to enter the fight. She'd certainly be a fun choice to use against High Mercury or High Midgard Stormer though, with willing allies. Still though, I'll consider build ideas for her, mostly with general rather than specific content in mind. Of course, unless she's facing a particularly hard-hitting high dragon, Veronica wants as much strength as possible, and that generally means Marishiten or Juggernaut as a more budget pick. Nyarlathotep doesn't synergize very well with Gespens, even though it works decently well with Nosferatu. For survival, Nidhogg and Silk may end up being relevant or at a minimum decent alternatives as well. For weapons, Veronica could go with the 4-star Shadow Wand Accursed Vare on a budget, which would give her another attacking skill, or opt for the 5-star Underworld Despair, which allows her to further manipulate her own HP thanks to its built-in heal. Plus, it has higher stats overall. I'll also give special mention to 2 other 4-star wands. Darkheart has Shadow Dull Res, which could come in handy in future Void battles. And Moonlight Rod allows Veronica to buff her own defense by 25% for 10 seconds. This would be needed to have her face High Brunhilde, should you wish to do so, unless you're planning on resurrecting Veronica. As for teammates, I quite like Curran and Zace, mainly because they're both straightforward damage dealers, each with multiple attacking skills that would benefit from Veronica's co-ability. Their own defense and HP co-abilities respectively could also make it easier for Veronica to survive at times. Another unit worth mentioning is Nefaria, since Veronica does appreciate a small amount of skill haste. With 3% or more, she can activate her first skill consistently within under 2 full wand combos. Since Nefaria won't always be the best option, I think Veronica's Wormprints are another avenue to receive that skill haste. In the absence of a wand-focused print, I quite like Heralds of Hinamoto on her, since it gives her 6% skill haste plus 30% skill damage. Another option would be Jewels of the Sun for its HP 70% equal strength and skill haste, perhaps in combination with a skill damage print like Lucas Prank. But generally speaking, I'm not crazy about HP 70% or full HP abilities on Veronica due to how poorly they work with Gespens. As a substitute, I think Flurry abilities would work well for her. For example, something like Dueling Dancers with Flurry Devastation and Light Res could serve her well alongside Heralds of Hinamoto. Otherwise, Flash of Genius is the only current Wormprint with Flurry Strength. Althemia is certainly Veronica's closest competitor, although the comparison isn't as cut and dry as those between Marth and Guden or Fjorm and Elisanne. Althemia and Veronica have the same maximum HP and co-abilities, yet Veronica has 49 more strength. Althemia also likely needs to spend a Wormprint slot to shore up her 75% paralysis res, with Revolutionary Magic, her signature print, being one of the best choices to do this. Althemia thrives at full HP. Both her passive and Revolutionary Magic grant skill damage under that condition, so for her to even compete with Veronica, those are the ideal circumstances. Having said that, this does mean Althemia can utilize some other full HP prints that Veronica shies away from. For instance, Evening of Luxury. Althemia will require a lot of player skill to ensure she's able to dodge without taking damage, or have a quick healer on the team like Heinwald. But under those circumstances, I don't think she's that much worse than Veronica. Although, that being said, I would still consider this the most nebulous comparison of those made so far in this video. Veronica is pretty tricky to evaluate. There's no doubt she's good, but it's harder for me to tell whether she's so much better than Althemia as to make a difference when we really don't know what the harder Light Void battles or High Jupiter will look like. And, well, that's about all I have to say on Veronica and the 3 lost heroes featured on this banner. Once again, I think your decision to pull this time comes down primarily to whether you like these characters or not. If you have no attachment to them, or if you're on the fence, you can always wait until toward the end of the showcase period to decide whether or not to summon. Let me know what you think about these characters and whether you agree or disagree with my analysis in the comments below. I'd be especially curious to hear from those of you who pulled Veronica and have experience playing her. Just how good do you think she is? I look forward to reading what you have to say. Otherwise, everyone, that's gonna do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, take care, and I'll see you next time.